is Connor. I'm going to drag Connor's image onto Photoshop to open it up in Photoshop. And I need to get a hold of the poster image as well. So I'm going to head over to Google and we'll look for the poster. This is designed for the poster for the movie Wolf of Wall Street. Poster. And of course, we can do a Google image search for this, not just a regular info search. And I'm interested in finding a large size graphic. The photos that you captured are quite high in resolution. Most of the images that you find quickly online are very low resolution. They look fine on screen, but they wouldn't print out very well. So I'm going to check under the search tools here, and we're going to look for any image, preferably 4 megapixels in size or maybe bigger. That will severely limit your search results, but you'll get much higher resolution images. So here's one that is about 7 megapixels. I'll go for that one. I'm going to click through to view the actual image. You'll notice it takes a moment to even show up and download because it's larger size. And I can drag and drop that image once it's downloaded right into Photoshop. So now I've got my 2 images. Okay. Photoshop right now is showing me images in tabs. You'll notice I've got 2 tabs. You might find it a little bit easier to, under a window, to ask for arrange. And I will float those in Windows so that I can see them independently here. Photoshop is a rather complex program to use. It's very mature, meaning that the program's been around for over 20 years. We're now into version 13. Okay? I started using it at version 2, just to give you some reference. A lot of the basic features and the ones that you'll need, though, haven't changed that much in the decades. Photoshop has a toolbar along the left-hand side with tools for things like zooming, moving around the image, adding type, or moving elements, paint brushes, that kind of thing. We've also got a menu across the top of the screen. We've got some contextual menus here that will change depending on which tools we have picked. And we have palettes, just like we do in Illustrator, lots of different palettes. The palettes, as you get moving them around, things can get rather confusing when you're working in Photoshop. So do yourself a favor when you start out, head over to the window menu, under Workspace, and go ahead and reset back to the essential menu items, and that will help organize things. You certainly want to make sure that you have the layers palette visible. We're going to be using this one a lot in this lesson. So if it's not open right now, go to Window, make sure that Layers is checked off and that we can see it. Right now, the background image for the poster here only has 1 layer, and the same for Connor. Okay. Let's have a look at Connor's image a little bit more closely before we try and merge it with the poster. It's possible with your image that you might decide you want to clean up or correct some blemishes that you might have in your photo. I wouldn't get too preoccupied with this. Some of those blemishes will be expected. A lot of the people that you're emulating in your posters are older than you are, so those extra little blemishes will actually help to age your skin a little bit. But if you wanted to get rid of a couple of them, let's say maybe Connor didn't want quite all of these little spots around here. One of the fastest and really one of the easiest tools to use for this is called the Spot Healing Brush. And you can access that one in the toolbar over here. You can tap the letter J on the keyboard even and get it. The Spot Healing Brush really feels like magic when you're using it. It's based on a brush size. So in Photoshop, if you want to pick brushes, they're always going to be up here as a fast way to get at them. Right now I'm dealing with a 40 pixel width brush. You might want a brush that is a bit bigger or smaller. And the brush hardness you can adjust here if you want a hard edge or soft. I'm going to stay with a soft edge so it blends in. Okay. And then if I move over to the image, watch what happens here when I click on this spot with the Spot Healing Brush. Gone. I can even click and hold and kind of fill in a spot, and as soon as you let go, it's like magic. They will just disappear. Yes, you can click and drag to sort of define an area. Okay? I'm not going to get rid of any more because, like I said, some of those spots, I have bad news for you. As you get older, they're only going to get more and more apparent, and you'll get more and more of them. unless you're particularly good about staying under the sun and using sunscreen. Okay? So we could do a couple of little touch-ups like that. I don't think we need to do anything major to this image. So I'm going to zoom back out. There are a few different ways to zoom. I can pick up the zoom tool here, and I can either zoom in, or if I hold the Option key on the keyboard, I can zoom out. Another nice shortcut key is the space bar, which automatically toggles to the hand tool, and I can move around the image. So I'm going to zoom out, and next thing I'm going to do, we want to essentially cut Connor out of this image and paste him into this one. Okay? So in order to make that quick cutout, and I don't have to be too exact with this, I just want to do a quick cutout. Imagine I had this as a paper image and I just want to quickly cut around it with some scissors. I'm going to use the lasso tool for that. This is one of the main selection tools in Photoshop, and we can use it to kind of run a quick lasso, a ring around something, and then use that to define a selection. So I'm going to pick up the lasso tool. This is not easy always with a mouse. Make sure you have a bit of room to let your mouse move around. I'm just going to quickly kind of run a line all the way around the image. I'm not going to be using Connor's hair for this shot. I'm going to keep Leo's hair. I might use his neck though, so I'm going to keep that component to it. And with a selection, what you want to do is make sure that the end point overlaps the starting point. As soon as I let go, you'll notice I've got these little, what we call marching ants, or little marquee line that runs around. This area here is kind of funny. It's added a little bit of extra to the selection. Very easy to fix. If you've got the lasso tool, you can hold down the Option key and you'll see a minus show up. And I can use that to kind of drag a little box around there and let go, and now it's deleted that from my selection. So I've got a selection defined there. To copy and paste it, it's really just as simple as edit, copy, and edit, paste. Or yes, shortcut keys, Command C and V. And so I've pasted it in. I actually don't really need to see the before image anymore, so I'm going to close it off. You might want to save it if you did quite a bit of editing. I really didn't, so I'm just going to say don't. And now I've got my main image. I'm going to click the maximize button here so I can see it more full screen. Not too sure why that didn't work. That's okay. Maybe I'll go back to arrange, and I'm going to put my images back into tabs, and that'll help. So over in the layers palette right now, we can see that I've got two layers. I've got a layer on top, which I can turn on and off with this eyeball. That's Connor on top. And of course, we've got our poster underneath. This checkerboard pattern that we're seeing is Photoshop speak for transparent. So when I see this checkerboard pattern, that means there are no pixels anywhere in the image. What I need to do to start off with this is just get Connor's face scaled and adjusted and put over top of Leo's, not really worrying so much about how it blends in, but just to get the scale of it right. So I'm going to be using the Move tool for that. That's the very first tool in the toolbar. And I'm going to make sure when I'm using the Move tool that I'm not going to check off Auto Select. That will let you select different layers as you click on them, but I only want to work with one layer. And I'm going to make sure that Show Transformation Controls is checked off. That will toggle those little handles that you see around the layer. Let us resize it. So I can pick up the layer and I can move it, but I can't see what's happening underneath it, which is kind of frustrating. I don't know how big Connor's face is in relation to Leo. So I'm going to take use of the opacity function in the layers palette. Over here in the layers palette, I have the option of making sure I have Connor's layer selected, and I can adjust the opacity down to something, say 50 or 60%, and that will let me see Connor's face over top. Now I can work on scaling it and adjusting it. Be very careful when you do the scaling, okay? You don't want to do this to your face, okay? Command Z to undo. I don't want to do this with my face. Instead, I'm going to hold down the Shift key while I drag from a corner, and that will scale the height and width uniformly. You might need to zoom in while you're here. A quick little shortcut for zooming, Command minus or plus on the keyboard. We'll zoom in and out. And I mentioned earlier, space bar will let you pan across. I still need to scale a bit more. Hold the shift key, scale down. And what we're trying to do here is line up the eyes as a good starting point. You'll notice that Connor's head is much more level. I'm going to rotate and again move it over. I'm kind of looking to see where his eyes are. Ears are a good indicator as well. Look at the nose and look at the mouth placement. We can readjust and tweak the scale a little bit afterward, but it's best if we try and get it right, if we can, the first time. Scaling images up in Photoshop is not a good idea. Scaling them down, not so bad. So I'd rather not make this too small and then have to enlarge it later. It's not going to be a perfect match. Of course, your features and proportions aren't going to match that of the celebrity you're overlaying. But most people have the same sort of general proportions. That, I think, is a good starting point. I'm going to click the checkbox, or you can press return on the keyboard, one or the other, to accept that. And I'm going to turn the layer back up to maximum opacity so I can see. And very quickly I can toggle on and off here and get a sense of how one face is comparing to the other. Let's work now on how we're going to composite the image together. In Photoshop there is an eraser tool, and I think most people, especially if you're more inexperienced in Photoshop, the logic would be to pick up the eraser tool, which works like a brush again, so I can pick a larger size brush or smaller size brush, and you might try and erase parts of the image in an attempt to try and make it look like your head kind of fits within the space of the existing one. But really the problem with that, skin color, we're going to have a difficult time blending this together, and this is doing what's called a destructive edit at the moment. Destructive edit means once I make this edit or this change, I can't go back and modify it later. Okay? Yes, I can undo a few steps in Photoshop, about 20 by default. I can keep hitting Command Z to undo. But ideally, I'd love to be able to do this so that if I decide to change my mind later, which we often do, I can do it. And there's an option in here for that. I'm going to undo the last few steps there. What we're going to use here is a fairly powerful tool in Photoshop, and one that a good photo illustrator would be using all of the time. It's not a difficult one to use, but pay attention because it might feel a little bit unintuitive at first, but I think you'll get the hang of it. It's called the layer mask function. And the layer mask allows you to paint out part of the photo, which kind of sounds like the eraser, except the beauty with the layer mask is not only can you paint out part of the image, but if you change your mind, you can also paint it back in. Okay? So imagine an eraser that had an eraser. As in, you could erase part of the image, but then change your mind and go back and unerase it. Interesting. So it works like this. I've got my layers palette over here, okay, and I've got the background layer. Down underneath here, I've got my Connor's head selected here. Right down on the bottom of the layers palette, you'll notice an icon here for Add Layer Mask. I'm going to click that, and very quickly you'll notice that another icon has shown up for the layer. I have the main image layer here, but I've also got a thumbnail now for a mask next to it. Okay? This is like a mask or a layer within a layer, like a Shakespearean play within a play. Okay? So these two work now in conjunction with each other. In fact, they're locked together right now. If I moved one layer, the mask would go with it. So how is this going to help us out? Well, I'm going to, and it's very important that you make sure you're either working with the image itself, okay, or you're working on the mask for the layer. So you click between the two. I'm going to make sure the mask is selected at the moment, and then the next thing I'm going to do, you'll notice the mask is white right now. Whenever you see white with the mask, everything will be visible on that layer. But if you paint or fill in the layer with black or gray, you will get, the mask will take effect. You will hide parts of the image. And if you hide with gray, it's like an opacity adjustment. You'll hide just a little bit at a time. So I've got the mask selected. I'm going to go to the Edit menu, and I'm going to fill that mask in with black. And immediately you'll notice that the mask turned to black, and no longer can I see Connor's face. His face is still here, the layer is still there, and he's on it, but it's masked out. It's been hidden now because of this black mask that's put on top. So I'm going to zoom into the face a little bit more, Command+. Hold down the Shift key and pan over a little bit. And here's where the fun starts, and it happens fairly quickly. I've got the mask selected. I'm going to, and you can use any tool in Photoshop that you can draw with to edit a mask, which is very powerful. So in this case, I'm going to use a very simple tool, the paintbrush tool. I want to adjust a brush size that's fairly big, so I'm going to go with a brush size that's about twice the size of that one, but I want a very soft edge on it, so I'm going to keep the hardness down quite low. I'm also going to adjust the opacity at this point. I don't want to cut this out like it would be with a pair of scissors. I'd rather cut it out like I had an airbrush. So I'm going to work with a low opacity. And here's what happens. I'm going to make sure that I am painting with the color white. So down here, a little color picker at the bottom of the toolbar, I'm going to reverse the colors. Here I can click default colors for black and white. Here I can reverse the colors. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that white is on top. White is my foreground color I'm going to paint with. And as I start to click here and add white to the mask, you'll notice that Connor's face starts to show through. Now, if you find that you're clicking and clicking and it doesn't seem to be happening fast enough, you can increase the opacity a little bit. And if this doesn't work out quite right, let's say I go down a little bit too far here, and I've overdone it a little bit, it's not a problem because we can go back and undo it afterward. I'll show you in a sec. I think his face is a little bit too low, and somehow the features seem too big. Do you notice that? Like the scale doesn't seem right? Judging by the laughter, I'll take that as a yes. So no problem. What I'm going to do here, though, is I'm going to click back on the layer itself, and I'm going to pick up the Move tool, and we can just scale his head a little bit again. I'm going to zoom out, scale his head a little bit. Now it feels like I can adjust the proportions correctly. I can kind of see what's happening. And maybe move it up. I use the arrow keys in the toolbar or on the keypad to just move up a little bit. Okay. I'll zoom back in. And now we want to try and fine-tune things here a little bit. So I'm going to go back onto the mask here, click back onto the mask, and I'm going to pick up the brush tool again. And I might need a bit of a smaller brush as I start to refine the edges a little bit more. Maybe a little bit lower opacity as we begin to narrow in here. I'd rather keep as much of Connor's face as I can. So I'm going to extend my adjustments. Now, you see what's happened here? Connor's hair came down over his forehead. We don't like that. So here's the beauty of the mask in action. All I need to do is switch to black for my foreground color and just paint that area back. Now I'm hiding Connor's image, leaving only Leo's forehead a bit more. When I'm done with that, I'm going to go back to white so that I can continue to add. Now I just heard somebody mutter something really important. Here it's getting a little bit dark. I think Connor's face is a little bit darker there. I'm going to go back to a black, mask a bit of that out. But somebody just mentioned a really important point, that the skin tones don't match here. That Leo's face just somehow seems different than Connor's. It's not a question of cutting more out or leaving more in. The two layers are just different. Now, we tried as much as possible when we took the photo to match the lighting, which was really important because there's very little you can do to change the lighting. But we can do lots in Photoshop to change color and tone. So to help us out with that part, we're going to use what's called an adjustment layer. I'm going to click back on Connor's face, and an adjustment layer shows up right here in the bottom of the layers palette, this icon right here. I'm going to click that, and we're going to make an adjustment layer for hue and saturation. Okay, you'll remember from the definitions for this project, hue is the term that we use to describe sort of like the name of a color, whether it's red or green or blue. Saturation is the intensity of it. So what I want to adjust here is the hue. But very importantly, I don't want to adjust the hue of both the poster and Connor's face. I only want to adjust the hue of Connor's face and leave the poster intact. So this little icon on the bottom of the adjustment layer is critical. That means that I'm about to sort of pin or clip this adjustment layer only to the layer below it. Okay? As soon as I do that, watch over here on the side of the layer in the palette. As soon as I click it, you'll notice an arrow just appeared there. That little downward arrow means that this adjustment layer will only affect this layer and not the other ones. Okay? So here's what happens. Now I've got that adjustment layer. I've got all these color controls. Now if this was an avatar poster and he's supposed to look blue, I could adjust all the way over to here. No, it's not an avatar poster. Command Z to undo. But I do want to shift his face from looking more red to looking more yellow, and that's just a simple little shift to the right. And you'll notice what a dramatic change that makes to how the image is blended together. All of a sudden, it feels like it just kind of clicked into place a bit more. Next little adjustment I'm going to make, and I'll add another adjustment layer, is just to brighten it up. The portrait that we took is a little bit darker. And you'll find in a lot of the photos that you're doing, the style of photography in a lot of those posters is often very high in contrast, meaning the blacks are really black and the whites are really white. So we can adjust brightness and contrast very easily. Another adjustment layer, brightness, contrast. Again, make sure we set it so that the adjustment layer is only affecting Connor's face. And now here's a brightness control. Watch his face. So there's brightness, and here I'll add some contrast. If I go too far with the contrast, we get that. I don't want it that high. And a little bit more brightness again. I don't want to go too far with the brightness. We'll end up with that. Yeah. So there we go. Okay, that looks much, much closer to what we had there initially. Now, over here near the eye, I'm noticing it's a little bit off. I'm going to go back to the mask for a moment, pick up my brush tool, and I'm just adding back in a little bit more of Leo's face there to fill in that. I think Connor's eye socket was just a bit darker there. Now, to kind of finish this off a little bit more, you could certainly spend more time tweaking the mask, deciding which parts of the face you want to keep or get rid of, but I'm pretty happy with that. You want to make sure it looks like you in the poster, not the original star. And for that, you're going to need at least your eyes, your nose, and your mouth. These are so characteristic of you. But if we look really closely here, the other thing that's kind of missing from this, you'll notice that the original poster underneath here kind of has a noisy, grainy look to it, like there's a textured pattern, whereas Connor's face looks very smooth. Now, part of that is because Connor's half the age of Leo, so his skin is going to look much smoother. But it also has to do with image compression and the fact that they may have even added a bit of that grain noise into the poster just to give it some grit. So we can emulate that back in Photoshop. Make sure we've got the layer selected, not the mask, but the layer. Head over to the filter menu under noise, and we're going to add a little bit of noise into the image. So I'll click add noise. And almost immediately we could see the effect that took place there. Whenever you're going to adjust noise, make sure you're zoomed in quite close to the image. I'm at 200% right now, that's fine. You want to be at least 100% magnification so you can really see what's happening at a pixel level to the image. I'm using monochrome noise, meaning it's not introducing any color, it's just adding blotches of light and dark. I'm using a Gaussian distribution. That means it's very it's not a uniform distribution, it's not following a grid pattern, it's kind of more random. And then we can play with the slider. Now, of course, if I slide up too far, we'll end up with that effect. But if I bring it down, and we want a very subtle amount here, in the neighborhood of around 4 or 5%, we're looking to see, does the texture pattern here sort of match what I've got in the poster over here? And it's pretty darn close. There's 4%. I can preview on and off. And you'll notice that we've done a pretty good job of emulating that grain pattern. And now all of a sudden, areas that look like they didn't blend so well before seem to just drop into place. Okay, so if I zoom back out, okay, there's the layer off. You'll notice that Connor's features are not nearly as fine as Leo's. Leo's got very fine eyes, very fine eyebrows. He's got a very slender nose and a short nose. His mouth is a little bit different. If you wanted to, you could start to play with scale a little bit on your own face to do that. But you know what? Those are the defining characteristics of his face. I don't want to change it that much. The idea is not to make your face look like the celebrity. It's to make the celebrity look like you. Okay? So that is the basics of it. Depending on how your layout goes, you might have to do some bits of retouching around the edges if you're trying to cover over somebody's face. In that case, something like the rubber stamp tool might be helpful, or little bits of cutting and pasting to help you out. But in short, that's how you can set up your movie poster.